A lot of group ownership too is there's a lot of spiritual things taking place. Like I have to trust that, the people who I've hired are doing the work that I hired them to do. I have to trust that they're doing it with integrity and to the best of their abilities. And I have to trust that the clients will be here next week.
This episode is sponsored by TherapyNotes, TherapyNotes.com. Be sure and check them out and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. Over 15 years ago, when I started my private practice, I had to learn a lot, and most of it the hard way, and I don't think you need to do the same. Hi, I'm Gordon Brewer, a licensed psychotherapist, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. Join me in this journey of discovery as we have conversations with other leaders and professionals in both the mental and allied health fields. Join us as we explore both the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. This is episode number 332 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. I'm Gordon Brewer, and glad you've joined me for this episode. And if this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. And if you're coming back for more, I'm glad you are back. And I hope you take time to follow us or subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. So this particular interview with my conversation with Amy Dover really has come at a good time for me in my life. And really what we talk about is just finding rhythm and just really thinking about navigating the different seasons of life. You know, we live in this really hustle culture, and I think that's been kind of pounded into us, is that you've got to hustle, you've got to go out and work hard, you've got to, be on top of your game. You've got to do all these things. But I think there are times in our life when we really need to kind of sit back and really kind of find, as I like to call it in my life, a new normal. As I've shared with many of you in earlier episodes, and those that know my story, I went through the death of my wife back in November of 2023, and just a long journey with taking care of her and that sort of thing. And, I'm really at a season in my life now where I am figuring out this new normal and what it means to, be in this phase of life. And so I'm doing a lot of reflection, doing a lot of work with my own therapist, and just thinking about what is the new normal for me and what does this whole life-work balance look like for me. And I really like the way that Amy framed it in terms of just finding a rhythm in your life. And so I'm looking forward to you listening in on this conversation with Amy. It was a meaningful conversation for me, and she's just a lovely person. And we recognize that we had a lot in common as far as our backgrounds and where we're from and all of that sort of thing. And so I think that's a Southern thing. But anyway, that was fun to catch up with Amy in that way. But before we get to my conversation with Amy, I'd love for you to go over to our website, practiceoftherapy.com. And if you're interested in working with me, I really enjoy doing one-on-one consulting with folks. And you can find out more about kind of my process around that by going to practiceoftherapy.com and just clicking on the button up there that says Start Consulting. And you can find out the different ways that you can work with me. Typically, what I like to do is just do a free 15-minute brainstorming session with folks to really talk about what your goals are, where you feel stuck, things that you want help with in your practice. And then we set up a plan for that. and, give you a proposal and talk about the cost of consulting and all of that sort of thing. But I'd love for you to check it out, and you can apply to do consulting with me by, again, going to practiceoftherapy.com/consulting or practiceoftherapy.com and click on the button, Start Consulting. Also, as I've mentioned on previous episodes, I've been doing a project with a good friend of mine, Ashley, and she was actually one of the caregivers for my wife, and we've developed a friendship over the years, and I've been helping her set up an online store that is just called Mental Health Wear TN, or Mental Health Wear Tennessee, and she is really doing a lot of work in creating T-shirts and different designs and wall hangings and all kinds of different swag items around this whole niche of mental health awareness, and also specific things for people in our profession. So if you're looking for the perfect LCSW t-shirt or LMFT t-shirt or LPC t-shirt, we've got them, and she's got them there in her store. But again, you can go to practiceoftherapy.com and click on the button that just says Mental Health Wear TN. And also, before we get to my conversation with Amy, I'd love for you to hear from one of the members of the Sightcraft Network, which is a network of podcasts that I started in 2022, and we are increasing in numbers. I think we're up to 16 different podcasts in the network, but we're all within this mental health, self-help, professional space. And so a lot of great members in the network. And so here's a message from them, along with a message from our sponsor of the podcast, TherapyNotes.
Hey there. If we haven't met, my name is Lisa Mustard, and I'm the person behind the scenes of the Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard, a podcast where I interview seasoned and knowledgeable talk therapists from the counseling world to glean valuable insights, techniques, and tools that you can apply to your practice and your life. Plus, you can also earn continuing education contact hours from some of my episodes. So to learn more about the show and get your first continuing education contact hour for free, head on over to my site, lisamustard.com.
Ready to upgrade your practice from a rusty bicycle to a shiny new sports car? Buckle up, because TherapyNotes is here to turbocharge your journey. It's the comprehensive practice management system you've been craving. Equipped with everything you need to navigate patient records, schedule seamlessly, host remote sessions, craft detailed notes, and tackle insurance billing with ease. And guess what? It's your trusty sidekick, available whenever and wherever duty calls. Picture having more quality time with your clients, all thanks to this digital assistant that never clocks out. Here's the kicker. It's Gordon approved, so you can trust it's the real deal. Bid farewell to paperwork headaches and embrace a new era of efficiency and top-tier care. Ready to level up your private practice game? Swing by practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes and punch in promo code GORDON for 2 months on the house. Enjoy the show.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm really glad for you to get to know today Amy Dover. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and Amy and I were chatting a good bit at the beginning, as like two Southerners always do. We started making connections and realized we had a lot in common, just family and where we grew up and all of that sort of thing. And so, but Amy, as I start with everyone, tell folks a little bit more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed.
I have been a therapist for a little over 20 years, and I'm not from Alabama originally. I was born and raised in North Carolina, as we talked about before we started the interview, and got married. And through my husband's work, he's an optometrist with the Army, and we ended up down here in South Alabama for his work. And he's at an Army installation down here. And we ended up raising our two sons down here. And we've been down here about 13 years, and we love it. We love being down here. We never thought that we would end up in South Alabama, but we are here and we love it. And I opened my group practice in January of 2015. So about 9.5 years in, I had done some work at a private practice in another town in Alabama before I opened my own. And most of my clinical work has been around family work, working with couples. I've done a lot of work with children. Before we moved to Alabama, most of my clinical work had actually been with registered sex offenders and who were in community corrections in the group setting. And so I feel like I have a pretty good background clinically, but I have definitely moved more into the group ownership CEO seat for the last few years, and I've really found myself enjoying that too. My work has shifted from taking care of clients to taking care of my team of therapists and my staff. And I have found that I really enjoy doing that. And so now some doors have opened and I'm doing some consulting work with people who are thinking about opening group practices or scaling to a group practice. And I'm honored to do the work. I love working with other therapists.
Awesome. Awesome. And I know from your contact with Whitney Owens at Wise Practice, you've got a lot of good experience in doing what you do. And so I appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, it's
How,
been I did a little presentation earlier this week on the good, the bad, and the ugly of group practice ownership. And I've learned a lot of things the hard way, much like you, as you say in the intro to your
yes.
show. I've learned a lot of
Yes.
things the hard way and had some pain that maybe I could have avoided, but I really think that it's made me better too.
Yeah.
And definitely gives me the opportunity to share that with others and help and guide them as they make decisions about scaling their practice.
Right. Right. How many clinicians do you have in your practice now?
I have 15 clinicians and 2
Oh, wow.
administrators. Yep.
Okay, awesome, awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's that to me is kind of a perfect size practice of just in my mind. But people aspire to do. I interviewed somebody earlier last week they were up in Manhattan, but they had like 300 people, and their practice was just as obviously it's doable, but I mean it's just a whole
Yeah,
different mindset when you get to be that large
it
kind of
really
thing.
is. And last year, this time, I was at 16
Mm-hmm.
and some things occurred. And I like to say that God did a little pruning at Dover
Mm-hmm.
Counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And I lost a couple of people, but I hired one back and or hired another one in that place. And so I'm at 15. And I'm with you. I feel like 14, 15 just really works for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it works for, just the community of therapists that I have here. It's just a good, cohesive group. I don't know what it is about 16 and higher. So far, it just hasn't worked for me so far. Not to say it won't in the
Right.
future, but I'm with
Right.
you. I kind of like this size.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think everybody has to find their sweet spot. But
Yes.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I know as we were chatting about before we started recording, we were talking about, as I do with everybody, talking about what we're going to talk about. And one of the things that I had said to you was just thinking about life balance as an entrepreneur. And what you said was, I would like to think of it not as balance, but as rhythm. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's a good place to start and just tell us, kind of your thinking on all of that and just kind of what you've learned with all of that sort of thing.
Okay. I'm
Yeah.
definitely going to be speaking from my lens of being a wife and a mother. And I have 2 sons, and they're older now. My younger one is getting ready to graduate from high school this month. And so
Mm,
my husband and I will be moving into a different chapter as well. It's exciting,
right.
but bittersweet,
Uh-huh.
but
Yeah.
having my children younger, when I started private practice, there were times when it was very much a challenge. And because you're working hard when you're opening your practice, and even when you're solo, you're working hard, and it's really hard to find a good balance of what do I give my clients, how do I shut that off and then go home and give to my family. And for a long time, I felt like I sort of gave my family the leftovers of me, and I felt as though I was chasing this elusive idea of balance. And everyone kept saying, you need to find balance. You need to have a good work life balance. And I could just never find that. And so it was about was probably about 8 years ago that I read this really great book. I can't even remember the name of it, but apparently it hit me. And
Yeah.
the author just really talked a lot about, it's not about balance. It's about finding the rhythms of your life, and your rhythms will change based on your needs, your family needs, maybe school starting or school stopping. And, if there's a medical issue that comes up, life is full of different seasons and rhythms. And it's important to understand that, to accept it, and then to change the rhythms of your life and of your work as you go through it. So, as we talked about, as a practice owner, there have been a lot of a lot of seasons where I've had to hustle. And so my rhythms have changed during that season to accommodate what needed to be done in the practice, and some scaling and some things that were happening. But then I would go into a season of rest, and the rhythms changed with that. And once I accepted that and kind of looked at it as this is my life, like kind of stepping back and taking the bird's eye view, this is life. I'm never going to have the balance that I think I'm supposed to have, but I can have different rhythms based on what's expected of me, what I need to do, what's happening in the practice, what my family needs. And that has just been sort of the game changer for me.
Yeah, yeah. And I like that term rhythm. And can you expound on that a little bit? I mean, what you mean by rhythm as opposed to balance? Because I think that's, in my mind, I think of life balance as okay, you've got everything organized just perfectly, and just everything just kind of flows well, and you have your schedule and all of that kind of stuff, which I absolutely suck at. All of that stuff. I mean, I just am not good at it. And I've done all the tools and seminars and stuff, and I still just, but the rhythm strikes a chord in that, to me, rhythm kind of speaks routine, but I don't know that that's what you mean necessarily.
I think that's part of it, because again, depending on, I used the example earlier of, again, I'm coming through the lens of a mother and a wife. When we would prepare to start back to school in August. Yes, kids go back to school in Alabama in early August. It's crazy to me. But
here for us too, in Tennessee. Yeah.
It's just still summer in my head, but
yeah.
So we get to the end of July and we know that we're a week out from summer starting. We begin the process of changing our rhythms. So we start to go to bed a little earlier. We start to change our meal routines. We start to change the way that we're doing things in the evening, sort of our bedtime and evening rituals and routines. And we start to get up a little earlier in the morning and preparing for that school day to start. And I'd like to say that it's always been this beautiful change in rhythm in my family, but no, that's not the reality. Life happens. But to me, that's an example of, it's more of a rhythm with the changes in the season of life, the season of work, the season of school. And so I'm going to change the way that I do work too. This is the schedule of my children. This is the schedule of my husband. So my work schedule and my rhythms will change to kind of fit around that as much as possible, as a practice owner. And then as we get closer to winter break and Christmas break, the seasons and the rhythms will change again. And my favorite rhythm is the summer rhythm, which is what we're getting ready to go into now. And things really do sort of slow down in my house, and there's not just this sense of urgency, and that carries over into my work. And so I love the idea of balance, but I've never found it. And when I gave that up and just said, okay, it's really about how do I need to shift my mindset, and how do I need to find the movement of my life that works for my family and me. And that's where rhythm really strikes me too. I can change my rhythms based on needs and based on desires. And sometimes within that rhythm, there's going to be a good balance of work and play and personal life. And sometimes within that rhythm, I might be giving a little bit more of my energy to work because that's what's needed. And then rhythms of where I am able to rest and spend time with my family and maybe step away from the practice a little bit longer for longer periods of time. So for me, that's where I've landed, and it's just worked.
Yeah. Yeah. That resonates for me. One of the themes that I've been kind of, it's interesting how stuff comes up with our patients or our clients that also kind of parallel our own lives to some
Yes,
degree. And one of the things that I've been paying attention to is this idea of urgency. And I think a lot of times we create urgency for ourselves when really there's no reason for it.
absolutely.
Like like a fear of running out of time, or a fear of missing out on something, or a fear of, if I don't do this now, then I'm going to miss the opportunity, or all of
Hmm.
those kinds of things that I think we can create for ourselves. And I think to be mindful of that and pay attention to that has been something that's been helpful for me here more recently.
I agree with that. And I feel like too, as therapists and then practice owners, there's even maybe more of that sense of urgency too. And because there's always a need that needs to be met, there's always something that needs to be done, there's always something left on
Mhm.
the task list and that needs to be carried over to the next day. And there's not really any sense of closure with things. And we have to balance that. But particularly as a group practice owner, I've had to step back at times and say, okay, what are the priorities here? What are the most important things that I need to get done? What are the things that aren't as urgent? And then why do I feel that sense of urgency?
Yeah.
Where's that coming from? And am I the one that's really feeding that? And if I am, why?
Yeah.
And how
Yeah.
is that messing up my rhythm?
Right, right. Yeah, I'm always reminded of, you might have seen this before. I think it's referred to as the Eisenhower time use grid. I think it was President Eisenhower, General Eisenhower, that came up with this, where you
Mm-hmm.
divide it up into urgent, not urgent, and then important, not important.
Yes.
And the different things in our lives that fall into one of those four places on the grid of being important and urgent, or being important but not urgent, that sort of thing.
Yes.
And the one place you don't want to end up too much time in is doing stuff that is not important and not urgent. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, or yeah, yeah. So, and I think a lot of times we can focus too much in that area, and kind of the optimal place to be is in the important, not urgent kind of sector, to devote your time to those things.
Absolutely. And I'll be honest, there are times when I don't know if it's avoidance or just some overwhelm, but I find myself in those unimportant tasks, spending my time in that. And I catch myself and, have to say, Amy, you have people who can do this for you, who want to do this for you. What are you
Hmm.
doing? And I really
Right.
do think it's because uh, I'm, again, maybe overwhelmed or procrastinating or avoiding the things that I know that must be done that are the most urgent and important.
Hmm.
And it's funny because I can absolutely empathize with your struggle, with the organization and trying to make this is the priority and this is the important task to get done. And I'm obsessed with paper planners.
Hmm.
That's my preferred way of doing things. My
Yeah.
planner has all of my
Yeah.
life in it. And I
Yeah.
still get made fun of for having a paper planner, but I don't care.
Yeah. That's what I
Yes.
do. The full
Yes.
focus planner is what I use. So yeah.
You're my kindred spirit. You understand what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. And
Right.
I'm excited because I found a new one to use. It's
Oh,
similar.
okay.
It's similar to the one that you have, and
Uh-huh.
but I find that when I can lay my days out and my tasks out, and
Hmm.
now that I'm a group practice owner, it's important that I'm kind of tracking what I'm doing on a quarterly basis too. And then when you add in the component of consulting, it's
Hmm.
just really need to be able to see things. And I'm just much more of a visual paper person than I am a screen
Yeah.
or a digital person. And so
Right.
that's what works for me. And when I'm able to look at everything in front of me, it helps me sort of, I think it speaks to my ability to understand if my rhythms need to change, or if I need to kind of change some morning routines or some things that I'm doing in the afternoon, and it helps me track my time better. And so I'm very much, particularly for women who are in relationships and have children, and who have just a lot going on, just really making sure that they're intentional with their time, and understanding that it's okay to say no to some things so that you can say yes to others. And as practice owners and therapists, we're not meant to say yes to everything, and that's okay. And because there are several things over here that need our energy and our yeses. So yeah, really being intentional and mindful of what I'm doing and what I'm spending my time and energy on is
Right.
I've come to see the importance of that over the last several years.
Yeah. Well, I think I agree with every bit of that, because one of the things that I'm a believer in is that particularly with the paper planner of writing things out, number one, it forces you to slow down a little bit. And
Yes,
I think our brains process the information differently than when it's on a screen. And so, I mean, that at least that's been my experience.
I
So
agree. But I
yeah,
prefer reading books like in my hands.
yeah,
Um, I
yeah.
have a Kindle. I love it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
they're wonderful, but I actually love to have a book in my hand, to smell it, to turn the
Right.
pages. It's essential,
Sure.
like a sensory thing for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I definitely think that the paper stuff, the planner particularly works for me because it is hitting several of my senses at one time, and I just do process things better.
Right. Right. Right.
And
So,
when the technology goes down, I still know what's going on in my life.
right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Or there, or yeah, the phone loses all its charge. And so then you're stuck. Yeah. So to change gears a little bit, Amy, I know you started doing some consulting with group practice owners and that sort of thing. What sort of themes do you see that come up a lot in your work with group practice owners?
I do see quite a bit of it. Is this the right time? Is this something that I want to do? Some fear, because moving into a group practice, it can be, I mean, it's scary. There's a lot of unknowns with that, and you hear horror stories, and not really sure what you're doing and what are the right resources for it. And there
Hmm.
is sometimes investment with your time and your energy and finances, investigating and researching and deciding what you want to do. But I do hear a lot of times, is it the right time? Is this for me? I've got a family and a busy practice. How do I manage all of that? How do I manage employees? Do I want to manage employees? So those are really a lot of the things that I hear. And then part of that too is, how do I get the right paperwork? There's a fear of the tax burden and just what all of that looks like. And I understand, because I was there at one point too. But that's a lot of what I hear. Just really, can I do this?
Right.
And
Right.
should I do this?
Right, right. Yeah. And I think it's in the consulting I've done with folks around the same thing is that it's none of us was prepared for that. I mean, into our traditional training, just how to
No.
manage people, I mean, we know how to work with people in therapy, but managing people is a whole different ballgame.
Yes, it is.
And also just knowing how to put all the systems in place and all of that sort of thing to make everything run well.
Yes. And I mean, I always say that I chased my tail the first 3 years that I
Mm-hmm.
was in practice. And 3 months after I opened, I hired my first clinician to come in and work with me, because I didn't want to say no to the work. And I
Mm-hmm.
very clearly remember having a conversation with my husband. We were out to dinner, and I said, I'm going to have to start turning clients away or turning referrals away, because I don't have anywhere else to put them on my schedule. And I was seeing 32 clients a week at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I don't know what to do. And he said, well call your friend so and so that you worked with and see if she wants to make some beer money on the side.
Yeah. All
She doesn't
right.
even drink, right? She
Yeah.
doesn't
Oh, yeah.
even drink
Yeah.
alcohol. But
Uh-huh.
that was the way that, I mean, how nonchalant of a way to make that decision. And
Right.
that's how it went from there. And
Right.
so I didn't know what I didn't know,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't know a lot. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was very blessed to have a couple of really good mentors who walked with me through some of that and
Mm-hmm.
were very realistic with me too. But in terms of the business side of things, there were some things I learned the hard way. It was the grace of God a lot of times that made the decisions work out the way that they did. And
Mm-hmm.
but through it all, I've learned so much, and I think group practice ownership just makes us better humans too. And it gives us the opportunity to interact with more people and to stretch ourselves and to hone our leadership skills and really bring, like, I love being there for my team. I love knowing that they know they can trust me. They know that what I
Mm-hmm.
say is going to happen. Some of them were just had terrible experiences working in community mental health and all of that. And I love showing them, hey, you can come to work and not dread coming to work, and you can enjoy the client work, and you can get paid a pretty good living and
Mm-hmm.
be able to take the time off that you want to. And I love showing them that different side of therapy work. So yeah, I did
Mm-hmm.
not step into group practice ownership in the wisest way. And so when
Mm-hmm.
in consulting work, I definitely try to let people know, hey, let's do this wisely. Let's take the knowledge and let's apply it and be wise about our decisions so that we can build a foundation that's sustainable for your growth.
Right, right. It's one of the things that, as we were talking about, and you've said already, learning things the hard way, which is how I opened the podcast and then kind of that little blurb at the beginning. But I think one of the things that I think everybody that is successful learns to do well is one is like you mentioned, Amy, seek out mentorship and get
Mhm.
people that have done it before and be able to talk with them about it and get that support along the way. I mean, it's really no different than that's what therapy does. I mean,
Mhm.
if somebody's struggling with something, not to do it alone,
Yes.
is the big message there. But I think also there, the accountability piece is there. But as much as anything, having that community around you to help support you in all of that is so important. And then the one thing that I'm still learning how to do, and it sounds like you've you've done this, had a little bit of the same struggle, is being willing to take things off my plate and delegate them out and not try to do it all myself.
Yes.
I'm still learning that one. Maybe when I grow up, I'll learn that eventually. But
Then you can teach
um,
me.
yeah, yeah. So, but that's one thing that I think is real important for people to remember, especially as you scale and grow, because what got you to what got you to being a full practice as a solo practitioner, getting a group practice full is a whole different. You can't do it the same way you did as a solo practitioner. So it's just learning those new sets of skills and new sets of doing things.
Yes. And the mindset shifts that have to come
Mm-hmm.
because I definitely had to do some work on that, and really my mindset around money and finances and around
Mm-hmm.
abundancy versus scarcity. And I think a lot of group ownership too is there's a lot of spiritual things taking place. Like I have to trust that,
Mm-hmm.
the people who I've hired are doing the work that I hired them to do. I have to trust
Mm-hmm.
that they're doing it with integrity and to the best of their abilities. And I have to trust that the clients will be here next week.
All
There's a
right.
lot of faith that comes into that. And
Uh-huh.
with Wise Practice Consulting, we do have that definitely sort of influences the consulting. It's faith-based practice consulting, and my faith is certainly something that I have leaned on quite a bit as a group practice owner, and because
Mm-hmm.
you can get very lonely. And when you spoke about community, you were absolutely right. And finding the Wise Practice community, and that's really what kind of helped me out with the loneliness that I felt at times too as a group practice owner.
That's such an important piece. And yeah, I think everyone that is in, it's just with stuff we know. If you're going to be a therapist, get your own therapy. And if you're
Yes.
going to be a group practice owner or just owner practices, have a group of mentors and trusted colleagues around you that you can bounce stuff off of and
Hmm.
process things with is just really an important piece of
It
things.
is. And
Yeah.
it was a game changer for me. And, having a group of people who just get it
Mm-hmm.
has
Sure.
just been really, it came at a time when I really needed it.
Yeah. Sure. Sure. I'm so glad we had this conversation, and I'm looking forward to. Are you going to be at the Wise Practice Summit this year? Are you
I
going to be
am.
able to?
I'm going to
Okay,
be
well,
there this year.
good.
I'm excited about it, and I
Uh,
do want to let your listeners know too, Gordon, that I will be starting a mastermind group in July for
okay.
any solo practice owner who is interested in scaling their practice to a group and maybe hiring their first 1 to 2 clinicians by the end
Mm-hmm.
of this year. So that starts in July, and they can go to the wisepractice.com website and look at my information, look at the
Mm-hmm.
information about Wise Practice Community, and fill out an application for the mastermind group if they'd like to.
Awesome. Wise Practice is a good organization. Of course, Whitney is a dear friend of mine, and I enjoy working with her. And we do a lot of neat stuff together. So I mean, it's a good thing. It's a
She's
good
great.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Well, Amy, so good to have you.
Thank you for having me, Gordon.
Well, a big thanks to Amy for being on the podcast, and I hope you found this maybe helpful in your own life and just in the way that you're approaching your practice and just this whole life balance kind of thing. And just maybe giving you some ideas of some different tools to use. I know one of the things that Amy and I talked about was just the use of our planners, which was a funny kind of trail we went down. But anyway, I do like using a paper planner. I think it gets me to focus in a different way. And the one that I use, and I've mentioned it on the podcast before, is just the Full Focus Planner, which is created by Michael Hyatt and Company. And I created a landing page for that at practiceoftherapy.com/full focus planner. It is there are some affiliate links in there, but just full transparency, but be sure and check that out. But the other thing too, I'll put in a plug here for is that Amy and I both will be at the Wise Practice Summit, which is going to be in October, and it's being hosted by my good friend Whitney Owens, and it'll be in Charlotte, North Carolina. I believe it's around October the 3rd is when it starts, but it's a great time to be in North Carolina in October. And Charlotte is a fun city if you've never been there before, and it's easy to get to with a major hub there for American Airlines. But anyway, plug for that, and there'll be links here in the show summary and the show notes for you to find out more about that. But again, big thanks to Amy. And if you're interested in working with Amy, again, you can go to Wise Practice Consulting and find out how to work with her. And also, if you're interested in working with me and doing some one-on-one consulting, you can do that as well by going to practiceoftherapy.com and just click on the link there or the button that says Start Consulting. And we can start that conversation by doing a free brainstorming session. So, love to hear from you on that. And also, before we go, big thanks to TherapyNotes for being a sponsor of the podcast. I will say that this is one product or one service that I can absolutely get behind. As you've heard me say before, it's the practice management system that I use in my practice. They are the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers in private practice, and they're constantly improving things, and their support is second to none. And it's really an all-in-one kind of platform in that you can do telehealth. There is a patient portal. There's a way to collect payments. It's got all the things, doing your clinical notes filing insurance claims. All of it is contained within Therapy Notes. So be sure and check it out, practiceoftherapy.com/therapy notes. And be sure and use that promo code Gordon, just GORDON, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. So be sure and check them out. And again, we've got lots of great guests lined up for the podcast. I'm excited about just the number of people that are reaching out to me and interested in the podcast. And also, real quickly, go over and check out the Psychcraft Network and the other podcasts that are members of this network, and a lot of great people there that are doing some great work in our field. So be sure and check it out. And you can find out more about that by just going to psychcraftnetwork.com. And so that's it for this episode. And we'll be back with you again next week for another episode of the Practice of Therapy podcast. You've been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. You can find out more about the other great podcasts in the network by visiting psychcraftnetwork.com. And if you haven't done so already, please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com and get your free private practice startup guide, along with a lot of other great resources and webinars and free things just by visiting. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. This podcast is intended to be educational in purpose and is not intended to give legal, accounting, or counseling advice. If you need a professional, find the right person for that.